guys. So today we're working on measurement, and there's a really interactive group of slides today for you to show your learning. So you'll notice that on this slide it says interactive measurement practice. Interactive practice using a ruler, measuring to the nearest half inch and quarter inch. And when we did measurement in school, you hadn't practiced fractions yet, but at this point you have. So half and 1/4 or quarter are really familiar fractions to you, I think. And when we're looking at a ruler, remember we want to zero in on the spaces in between these whole numbers when we're looking at halves or quarters, right? So you'll notice that this ruler here shows whole numbers, which are these big guys, right? And then halves, the nearest half inch. So we have 1/2, 1 whole, 1 1/2, 2 wholes, 2 1/2, 3 wholes, and so forth. So a lot of the time when you're going to be measuring on these slides, you have to measure the object. So let's say, for example, I was measuring Mr. Orange Circle, who is adorable and has blue glasses, right? I would need to go, he's lined up perfectly with his little elbow on the zero, and his furthest point is this elbow, right? His left elbow. So when I go down, ding, 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 tick, it hits this number 2 on the ruler. So I know that from elbow to elbow, Mr. Orange Circle is 2 inches. I wonder if Mr. Yellow Circle is the same. This one's kind of tricky because he's not lined up at the 0, and I can't click and drag him over there. So I know his measurement starts at 10 1/2, right? Because it's halfway between 10 and 11. And it ends at what we can assume is like the 12 1/2, right? So if I'm subtracting 12 1/2 minus 10 1/2, I end up with 2 again. So it's kind of fun that Mr. Orange and Mr. Yellow are the same length. All right, that was sidetrack, but I just was excited and I love learning. So I'm moving on to the next slide here. It says drag the box to create a rectangle that has a width of 8 1/2 inches. Width is how wide something is, right? So similar to Monday's assignment, I'm going to be clicking on the box, and I know it's selected when those blue boxes come up, and then I can drag it. I'm going to click and drag it to show where 8 1/2 is. But before I click it, I need to figure out where 8 1/2 is, right? I have whole numbers, and I'm going ding, there's 8, and 8 1/2 is shown right here, this tick mark. So I have that in my brain. I'm going to click and drag it over. And it doesn't have to be exact, but I really want to give this my all, so I tried really hard to make sure that was lined up to 8 1/2. And that's all I have to do. I just have to make sure that I'm not selecting the box anymore, and I can do that by clicking away from it, and I'm good to go on that slide. Now, last thing I want to show you before I send you off to do some work is all of these rulers show half inches and full whole inches, right? But oh boy, look what happens when I get down to slide 7, or in your case, it will be slide 8. Now there's way more lines on my ruler. So before you get overwhelmed, remember, in between these whole numbers, it's just like fractions on a number line. So I still have my whole numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 12. I still have my half. I can see that right here if you look closely. And so half of 1/2 is a 4th. Right? I just doubled the 2 and I get 4. So that means that I have 1/4, 2/4, or 1/2. 3/4, 1 whole. 1 1/4, 1 1/2. 1 3/4, 2 wholes. So that can help you as you're working on these slides. And I'm going to find one that has a 4th. So on this slide, it's asking me to click and drag this box to 6 1/4 or 1/4 inches. So the first thing I need to do is figure out where the 6 is. And I need to go 1/4 past, 1/4 of an inch past the 6. And here's where I really need you to be accurate with this. Okay, friends? So we're going to try our very best. Oopsie doozles. There we go. Undo. We're going to try our very best to make sure it lines up well. Whew. Man, you really got to focus for that. No, that doesn't work. I was going to zoom in and see if that helped. Actually, if you press Control and the minus symbol, it's next to the 0 on my keyboard. It does make it a little bit bigger, but you don't have to mess with that if you don't want. Just an option for you to zoom in on your screen if it's kind of hurting your eyes. All right, friends. Well, happy learning.